What's up everybody, Nate here. And it seems like over the last few years, our entire country, and world for that matter, has gone through crisis after crisis. We have faced stock market crashes, we have faced wars, and of course, an entire global pandemic. One thing I've heard repeated over and over again is that people are tired of living through major historical moment after major historical moment. But what if I was to tell you all the stuff that's happening right now has already happened in the past? Mind blown. Well, kind of, at least according to a book called The Fourth Turning: An American Prophecy by William Strauss and Neil Howe. This book basically talks about how history has been repeating itself all throughout time, and today I kind of want to give my thoughts about it and discuss why exactly history might be repeating itself over and over again and why that's a big deal. Quick disclaimer here, this video is not going to go over the entirety of the book. We're just going to talk about the main general principles from it. So if you want to read it for yourself, I encourage you to do that. Now, growing up, I was a huge history buff. History Channel was pretty much on 24/7 in my household. So when I heard of this book, I was super interested to hear more. And I thought all of you might find it super interesting too, so I wanted to kind of talk about it on this channel. Now, this is completely for entertainment purposes. I'm not saying that what is going on in these books is completely true and that I believe it. I just wanted to talk to you about it because I think it is really interesting and it has a big impact on business and finance throughout the entire world. And I kind of break the book down in very general terms. The book states that history often repeats itself in 80-year blocks. Now, obviously, this is not exact, but basically within those 80 years, it breaks it down further into 20-year blocks, and those are what we like to call generations. Basically, each generation has a purpose within our society. Now, the four generations that are within each 80-year cycle are boomers are sort of the beginning of our 80-year cycle, and this book calls them the prophets. These are your billionaires and your established politicians who are making the big decisions in our economy today. They typically have the most money, and they basically know how our entire economy works because they have seen pretty much all of it develop throughout their lifetime. Next is going to be the nomad generation, which is Generation X according to this book. The nomads are inventors, and they are the ones that have taken basically everything that the boomers have built and sort of amplified it to work for our economy today. Next, you have the millennials or the hero generation. And the hero generation kind of takes things one step further because now they are going through crisis after crisis, and they are the ones that have to kind of figure out and solve all of the messes that the boomers and the Gen X's have created. And then the final generation is Generation Z, or the artist generation. And this generation is kind of now poking fun and trying to figure out how to digest all of these past generations' failures and successes. And they mostly do that through media. Like today we have social medias like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, or they do that through music. Whatever the media is, they are now going to be the ones to digest everything that has come before them. Now, it's important to mention here that each one of those four generations is a major part of the 80-year cycle, because throughout that 80-year cycle, you have the high period, the awakening, the unraveling, and then the crisis. Well, if you take a closer look at the title of this book, the book believes that right now in the United States, we are in a period of crisis. Now, the crazy thing about this book in particular is that it was written all the way back in 1997, so it's kind of predicting in a pseudo way all of the things that are happening right now. It at least predicted that we would be in a somewhat crisis. I'm not going to break down each of the individual 20-year cycles here, but basically, like I said before, it goes through a high period, a period of awakening, then a period of unraveling, and then a period of crisis. Look at our economy today. If you look at our country today and our world, there is a lot of craziness going on. We have a lot of issues with housing. We have a lot of issues with inflation and money printing. Not to mention wars and things like the pandemic are still going on throughout the entire world. But even if you look back before when this book says we are in our 80-year period, which is supposed to end in 2028, well, we had a lot of issues even before that 80-year period. Between World War I and World War II, there was a lot of issues, and it didn't take 80 years to kind of go through that entire period. We obviously had World War I, we had pandemics, and then we had the Roaring 20s, but also Prohibition, and then the Great Depression. More wars kind of came from that. So one of the big criticisms that I have from this book is that it kind of leaves out this idea of microhistory. And while history may repeat itself, history is always different throughout time. The catalysts that sort of create event after event are almost always different. Even if you look at it from a financial standpoint, our economy goes through a wave of booms and busts over time. So we have periods of really high prosperity, and we have periods where the majority of people in our country are struggling financially. Now, I'm not saying that the book is completely off base here. I'm not saying that history doesn't repeat itself, because I do think in certain aspects, history does come back. However, there is more going on here than just sort of the cultural reasons of why we go through booms and busts. What you've got to consider here is the why. Why exactly do we go through 80-year periods where history seemingly repeats itself time and time again? Well, one of the major reasons for this isn't just cultural, it's also by country, and more importantly, by empire. If you look at the principles for dealing with the changing world order by Ray Dalio, you'll see that country after country and empire after empire has pretty much gone through the same cycle all throughout time. Ray Dalio talks about this from the financial side and what he calls the rise, the peak, and then the fall. Now, the reason this is so significant, especially if you are an American watching this, is because the United States, for pretty much the last 80 years or so, has been the largest empire in the world. The United States dollar is the reserve currency of the world, and the United States military has bases all throughout the entire planet. Not to mention, we are one of the largest GDPs and one of the most stable economies on the planet as well. That makes us a very strong country and the world's strongest empire. But like any empire, and even talking about this American prophecy book, well, they kind of go through an entire cycle. There is the period where everything is only going up, especially when you start as a country like we did after the Revolutionary War. There is nothing. People have to kind of create something for there to be an economy, for there to be goods and services, and for you to survive. That means that there is this huge sacrifice that a lot of our citizens had to make right off the bat because they wanted to have a country. That's when all of your industries start to get born, all of your money starts to get poured into the country, because now you're establishing industries and you're establishing companies that are going to last for a long time. These are vital industries. Eventually, though, you have more generations that come from that, and when you have a society that is doing really, really well, the new generation is going to look at the old generation and they're not going to realize why they have to work as hard, because the previous generation already built everything. But they have to figure out ways to continue to grow their wealth, which is why you have a lot of money printing going on, which is why you have more industries being born, technology advances, debt also starts to grow. All of that is completely unsustainable. More money printing causes inflation. Debt can get out of control. The United States government owns $32 trillion in debt, and it's spiraling out of control. And as you have crisis after crisis, it creates a divide between the haves and the have-nots, or the wealthy and the poor. That creates a lot of cultural issues, and all of a sudden now your country starts to decline in the fall. Now the government tries to redistribute wealth. They try to take money from the rich and give it back to the poor, because that's what the poor wants, and that will keep the rest of their country happy for a little bit longer. Eventually, though, your entire country kind of starts to go through a big crisis, like we saw during the 2008 housing market crash and the Great Recession. Crisis after crisis starts to come up in shorter spans of time, because now your country has to just continue to print money and go into further debt, because there really isn't anything left to do. They can't get any more money from tax dollars. They're in a huge deficit and nobody wants to be taxed more. But like I said before, that is completely unsustainable, and when you have conflict inside your country like we are going through right now with a lot of cultural issues, then the only thing left is external conflict, like we could see with China and Russia and all of these other countries. Well, eventually it just becomes way too much to manage, and at some point that empire falls and a new empire rises from that. Now, we don't know if the United States is near the end of its empire. Ray Dalio would believe we are in the fall right now, and the Fourth Turning book also believes that the United States is in the end of one of its 80-year blocks. But like I said before, why exactly does this happen? Why exactly do we continue to go through this cycle after cycle of booms and busts and 80-year periods? I mean, you'd think that if we know this and there's books being published on it, then why do we continue to fall for the same traps every time? One of the major reasons for this, according to Ray Dalio, is because the new generations often forget what happened in the past because they're experiencing things for the first time. The stock market crash of 2020 was a crazy time for me in particular, and it felt like the world was kind of ending according to the media and according to even my own finances. It was insane to kind of live through that and to watch all of the major indexes fall so quickly like that. However, if you were a part of, say, the 2001 dot-com bubble, or you were a part of the 2008 stock market crash, well, then you probably remember things a little bit differently. And we can go even further back from that. If you were a part of the 1929 stock market crash, well, the 2008 and 2020 crash might not seem all that serious to you. Not to mention, if you were somebody that lived through the 1917, 1918 pandemic, well, if that person had a time machine and came back to 2020, they would not really think what was going on was that crazy. They would understand because they lived through it. The issue is generations grow up and they haven't faced a major crisis yet. So when one finally pops up, they believe that this is the end of the world. And whether you're talking about the fourth turning or the New World Order, according to Ray Dalio, is that history isn't just in the past, it's also the future. And the future can be good or bad. It really just depends how we reflect on the past. Just because history up to this point has sort of gone through these 80-year blocks, or according to Ray Dalio, 100 to 200-year blocks, doesn't mean that it needs to continue to go that way. There's nothing saying that the United States has to lose its spot as the reserve currency of the world. There's nothing saying that we have to continue to go through crisis after crisis. Yes, there are things in this world that you simply cannot control, but there is a lot that you can control just by thinking about the past. We live in a time where building your wealth and educating yourself is pretty much easier than it has ever been in history. That gives us a unique advantage to learn about our past and to reflect about our past, so that way we can prevent bad things from happening in the future and bring forward a lot of the good things. And no, that's not to say that we're never going to go through a recession again, and we're never going to have wars, and we're never going to have other issues in our economy or across the globe. But the whole idea here is this: because you have access to education like no other generation had before, that means you can feed yourself spiritually and take care of yourself mentally and physically, and then know how to handle your money so your finances are also taken care of. If each and every one of us takes a little bit of time to take care of ourselves, then we can take care of the entire world around us slowly but surely. Being healthy mentally, spiritually, and physically allows us to have a bigger impact with our dollars, and it allows us to grow our wealth a whole lot faster because we're not focused on things that are just dragging us down. Once we have our personal finances taken care of, well, now you can spread the wealth around and you can help your own community and give back. That has real impacts on today, and hopefully that can completely break this 80-year cycle of negativity. I don't like talking about crisis after crisis on this channel. All of this doom and gloom stuff that continues to go on, well, it's just as exhausting for me as I'm sure it is for you. My goal with this channel is to inform you and to keep you aware of everything that is going on, but hopefully in the future we can prevent a lot of these issues happening simply by taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other. This channel is my way of doing that for you. I want you to be aware of all of these issues so that way you can make the best decisions with your money, so you can continue to help the world in whatever way you can. I want you to be as educated as possible, not only on your finances, but on how the entire world works. And the reality is, I understand the concept of this fourth turning and Ray Dalio's principles as well, because I talk about the news constantly. And the really interesting thing about the news is that all of these issues that are happening today, well, they didn't just come from nowhere. They've been ongoing for years now, and they were caused by things that happened 20 or 30 years ago. Everything happening today has been one domino falling after another. And being educated, you can live a more successful life, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and financially. And at the end of the day, taking those small steps may not help 1 million+ people around the world, but even if they just help one person, that is a total success in my book, even if that person is you. Let me know what you think about this idea of history repeating itself in empires in the comments below. And let me know if you think that history does actually repeat itself, or if all of this is complete nonsense. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.